Tristan Bailey was born on January 18th, 2008 in St. John's, Florida, to Forrest and Stacey Bailey. She was the youngest of 5 children and was surrounded by love and care. From an early age, Tristan displayed extraordinary energy and optimism that inspired her family and friends. Her parents often said that her cheerfulness was like sunshine that warmed them even in difficult times. The Bailey family lived in a cozy suburb where life was measured and quiet. In this community, everyone knew each other, and the children grew up in a safe and friendly atmosphere. Tristan was surrounded by attention from childhood, not only because of her family, but also because of her bright personality that drew people to her. She was the kind of person one could always turn to for advice or support. Tristan grew up an inquisitive and active child. Her childhood was filled with adventure, sports, and socializing with friends. Even from a young age, she was interested in a variety of activities, from playing outside to participating in school events. Her parents were always supportive of her endeavors, whether it was participating in an art club or playing sports. At home, Tristan loved to put on little shows for her siblings. She was a born leader who knew how to inspire those around her. Her older siblings always supported her in every endeavor, creating an atmosphere where everyone felt part of the same team. When Tristan started cheerleading, her life took on a new meaning. The sport immediately captured her attention. She devoted a lot of time to training, quickly progressing and gaining recognition from her coaches. Cheerleading became not just a hobby, but an important part of her life. Tristan participated in competitions and often found herself in the spotlight due to her talent and charisma. She not only showed outstanding results, but also knew how to support the team in difficult moments. Her teammates and coaches recalled that Tristan was always ready to help, whether it was extra training or moral support before an important performance. She was not afraid to take responsibility and often acted as a leader. At school, Tristan was not just a student. She was a favorite among both teachers and peers. Her natural charm, sincerity, and desire to learn made her an example for others. She was active in school activities, was part of the cheerleading team, and strived to be of service to her community. Friends described her as someone who knew how to lighten the mood in any situation. Her smile was infectious, and her ability to connect with people of all ages set her apart from the rest. Tristan was the kind of person you could always turn to for support or advice. Family always came first for Tristan. The Baileys were an example of togetherness, where everyone supported each other, Forrest and Stacey. Bailey raised their children in an atmosphere of love and mutual respect. Each night, the family gathered over a shared dinner, sharing stories and events of the day. This became a tradition that helped keep the bonds between all family members close. Tristan's siblings adored her and always tried to be there for her, supporting her in all her endeavors. May 8th, 2021 began as an ordinary, unremarkable day for the Bailey family. Tristan, a teenage girl, spent it like so many other days of her life, doing homework, socializing with her family, and studying hard for her upcoming cheerleading competition. This competition was an important event for her, and she strived to be in the best shape to perform at her best. On this day, nothing portended trouble, and no one close to her could even guess that this day would be the last day they would spend together with her. Tristan was a vibrant and active part of her family. Her smile always lit up the house, and her cheerfulness inspired everyone around her. She loved spending time outdoors, hanging out with friends, and enjoying moments of carefree teenage happiness. Her family was used to her busy schedule, and her parents were always supportive of her aspirations and hobbies. Socializing with friends and classmates was a natural part of her life, and Saturday nights were usually spent talking, laughing, and walking. That night, May 8th, Tristan told her parents that she was going out with her friends. This statement did not arouse any suspicion in them, as such gatherings were commonplace. They wished her a good time and expected her to come home as usual. However, something happened that night that turned the Bailey family's life upside down. When the morning of May 9th came, Tristan's parents began to worry. She had not returned home by the appointed time, and her phone had stopped ringing. This was highly unusual for Tristan, who had always kept her family informed of her whereabouts. At first, her parents hoped she had stayed over at a friend's house or had spent the night. But calls to friends and classmates were fruitless. No one knew where she could be. The anxiety was growing by the minute. By noon, it was clear that the situation was far more serious than just teenage disobedience. Tristan's parents contacted the police to report her disappearance. That day was the beginning of a massive search operation involving local law enforcement, volunteers, and concerned St. John's residents. News of Tristan's disappearance spread quickly throughout the county. St. John's was a small community where people were used to supporting each other in times of need. Upon hearing the news, neighbors and family friends banded together to help in the search. Pictures of Tristan and calls for help began circulating on social media. People posted messages with her description, where she last appeared, and asked anyone who saw or knows anything to contact the police immediately. Surveillance footage of Tristan in the final hours before her disappearance drew particular attention. This footage became an important piece of evidence in the investigation, raising many questions. Why did she disappear if everything looked so routine? What happened after the camera stopped recording her movement? Aiden Fucci, the last person seen with her, became a key figure in the investigation. Tristan's family was at a loss for words. Every hour without news seemed like an eternity. Volunteers and police were scouring the area, checking every possible direction she could have gone, and interviewing residents in the neighborhood. People set up tents to organize search teams, bringing food and water to support those involved in the operation. No one wanted to give up until the girl was found. For Tristan's parents, it was an unbearable time. They only held on because of the support of family, friends, and everyone who joined the search. Every new phone call, every rustle at the door gave hope that it was news about Tristan. But time passed and no answers appeared. When it became clear that Tristan was missing, law enforcement immediately launched an investigation. The police acted quickly and decisively, realizing that every minute could be worth its weight in gold. They interviewed everyone who might have known about Tristan's last hours, including her friends, neighbors, and family members. The primary focus was on reconstructing her route that night. Of particular interest was Aiden Fucci, a classmate of Tristan's who, according to witnesses, was the last person to see her before she disappeared. Aiden told police that he had indeed seen Tristan off that night, but then she allegedly headed home and he went the other way. His story seemed plausible, and initially there was no reason to doubt his word. However, investigators continued to verify every detail to ensure there was no possibility of error.
Investigators say this is Tristan, 13-year-old Tristan, walking with her accused killer, 14-year-old Aiden Fucci.
Aiden also volunteered to be interviewed, further easing suspicion. He claimed that nothing unusual had happened that night. But as the investigation progressed, minor inconsistencies in his story began to surface that kept investigators on their toes. Nothing yet pointed directly to his involvement, but doubts remained. Meanwhile, for the Bailey family, the hardest days of their lives had begun. Every minute without news of Tristan was agony. The parents hoped that their daughter was about to come home, or at least that someone would let them know that she was safe. However, with each passing hour, it became more and more apparent that the situation was far more serious than they had realized. The police launched a massive search operation. They involved dog handlers, patrol teams, volunteers, and even helicopters with thermal imaging cameras that scanned the neighborhood. The neighborhood was relatively quiet and safe, so Tristan's disappearance came as a shock to everyone. People tried their best to help in the search, putting up posters with her photos and posting information on social media. The night of May 9th passed in tension. Tristan's parents, friends, and neighbors stayed up praying for her safety. However, despite all efforts, there were no results from the search. The Bailey family tried to remain hopeful, but their anxiety grew. The parents felt time was running out and increasingly wondered if they would ever see their daughter again. By the evening of May 9th, investigators had the first important lead that could shed light on Tristan's disappearance. Security cameras installed near the area where she was last seen captured Aiden Fucci's strange behavior. The footage shows him returning home alone while looking agitated. This footage caused police to pay more attention to him. Investigators noticed that inconsistencies were appearing in Aiden's testimony. For example, he claimed that after saying goodbye to Tristan, he went straight home, but the video footage contradicted his words. In addition, his demeanor during interrogations was suspicious. Aiden often confused details and behaved nervously, although at first glance he tried to show calmness. These facts led to the police deciding to search Aiden's home. They were looking for any clues that could shed light on Tristan's disappearance. This was the beginning of a deeper investigation into him. In parallel with the investigation, the police continued their search operations. They enlisted the help of residents in the neighborhood to gather more information. Any little thing could become an important clue, and law enforcement did not miss any opportunity. Dozens of people were interviewed, and many possible routes Tristan could have taken were checked. For the Bailey family, the weight was becoming increasingly unbearable. They tried to stick together, supporting each other, but the tension and fear for their daughter was too much. Friends and family close to the family were also in a state of shock, trying to comfort Tristan's parents and help organize the search. The St. John's community showed amazing unity. People came to the Bailey family home to show support and offer help. Volunteers set up headquarters where they coordinated search teams. Additional surveillance cameras were placed on the streets to increase the area of control. The morning of May 10, 2021, was a turning point in the investigation. Just over 24 hours after Tristan Bailey was reported missing, a disturbing report came in. One of the volunteers involved in the massive search operation came across an eerie find in a wooded area not far from Tristan's home. This wooded area was only a few kilometers from her neighborhood, on a path that was rarely used by locals. A volunteer looking around the area noticed clothing that matched the description of the one the girl had last worn. As he got closer, he realized he had discovered a body and immediately called the police. The report came as a shock to everyone who had hoped to find Tristan alive. When the police arrived on the scene, they confirmed the worst fears. The body found in the woods was indeed that of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey. Although details were immediately classified to protect the investigation, the news of her death itself quickly spread throughout the community, causing a wave of grief. Investigators began to scrutinize the crime scene to gather all possible evidence. The first thing that caught their eye were signs of violence. Already during the initial examination, it became obvious that Tristan's death was not the result of an accident. The police immediately declared her death a homicide. Later, it became known that Tristan received more than 100 stab wounds, which shocked even experienced detectives. This fact pointed to the particular brutality and intensity of the attack. Experts noted that such a degree of violence could indicate personal hatred, or that the attacker was in a state of strong emotional excitement. Marks were found on Tristan's body that indicated she had tried to defend herself. There were cuts on her hands, characteristic of attempts to block knife blows. However, the attack was so fierce that the girl didn't stand a chance. The scene where the body was found provided a lot of evidence that became key to the investigation: the crime weapon. Although the knife used in the murder was not immediately found, the nature of the wounds allowed experts to determine the type of weapon. This information was important for further searches. Shoe prints. Footprints were found on the ground near the body that matched the teenager's shoe size. These prints were an important piece of evidence to link the suspect to the crime scene. Bloodstains. Officers noticed bloodstains that could have possibly belonged to both the victim and the assailant. They collected samples for DNA testing. Location of the body. Tristan's body was found in a posture that experts believe could have been the result of displacement after the attack. This indicated an attempt to cover up the crime or confuse the investigation. The news of Tristan's death shocked not only her family, but the entire local community. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered outside the Bailey family home to offer condolences and support. People brought flowers, candles, and notes in memory of the girl whose life was so cruelly cut short. Local residents who were still recently involved in the search couldn't believe the tragedy had unfolded so close to their home. Hundreds of people came to the memorial to honor Tristan's memory and show support for her family. Aiden Fucci, 14, became the focus of the investigation after police discovered he was the last person seen with Tristan Bailey. CCTV cameras captured them on the night of May 8, 2021, heading towards a wooded area near their apartment complex. That footage was the deciding factor that helped investigators focus on Fucci. He was Tristan's classmate, and their friendship seemed quite ordinary to those around them. However, it soon became clear that this superficial friendship may have masked the tensions and motives that led to the tragedy. After Tristan's disappearance, Aiden Fucci's behavior raised many questions. As early as May 9th, when the police began to receive the first evidence, he was called in for questioning as a potential witness. However, instead of showing concern or helping in the search, Aiden behaved strangely and even mockingly. The most shocking moment occurred when the teen made a Snapchat post. The photo showed him in a police car, and the caption to the image read, "Has anyone seen Tristan?" The gesture was seen as a mockery of the tragedy and drew widespread condemnation. Tristan's classmates, family, friends, and the public found the act not only inappropriate but also suspicious.
The Snapchat videos were taken when Bailey was still considered a missing person. In them, Fucci does not seem to show any signs of remorse or concern.
When questioned, Aiden stated that he saw Tristan on the night of May 8th, but then they separated and he does not know what happened to her. However, his version of events began to raise doubts among investigators. When asked about why he didn't call friends or try to find out if Tristan had returned home, he was evasive. Investigators noticed that he avoided direct answers, often repeated himself and confused his words. Even more questionable was his refusal to explain why he was walking toward the woods with Tristan, if he planned to return home. His demeanor seemed wary, and his reactions to questions seemed unnatural. The police decided to search Aiden's home to check his alibi and find possible evidence. During the search, important discoveries were made: blood-stained clothes. In his room, the police found clothes that had traces of blood on them. DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Tristan. Gun sheath. Although the knife used in the murder itself was not found, a scabbard was found in Aiden's room that matched the size and shape of the alleged murder weapon. CCTV footage. CCTV footage showed Aiden and Tristan walking together towards the woods. Later footage shows Aiden returning alone without her. Investigators began interviewing Fucci's friends and acquaintances. Many of them recalled that the teenager had a strange interest in violence. He often made disturbing statements about wanting to kill someone or do something out of the ordinary. Some classmates said they took his words as a joke, but in light of what happened, it took on new meaning. In addition, friends said that Aiden sometimes seemed angry and aggressive, especially if he didn't get what he wanted. This description created a portrait of a teenager with potentially dangerous behavior. During interviews, psychologists and investigators noticed that Fucci possessed traits of narcissism and a lack of empathy. His reaction to Tristan's death, a mocking social media post, and a complete lack of remorse only reinforced these suspicions. Aiden showed no emotion when discussing the events of that night. His responses were either extremely cold or evasive. This behavior, according to experts, indicated that he may have acted deliberately without fear of repercussions. Under the pressure of the evidence and after lengthy interrogations, Fucci partially confessed to his involvement in the murder. However, his confession was confusing. He stated that the attack was accidental and that he just lost control. Nevertheless, his testimony was inconsistent with the nature of the crime, which experts believed indicated premeditation. During the interrogations, he also mentioned that he always wanted to try what it was like to kill someone. This phrase was one of the most shocking moments in the investigation, showing that his motives may have been linked to sadistic tendencies. Because of the nature of the crime, prosecutors made the decision to try Aiden Fucci as an adult despite his young age. This decision sparked debate in the community, but authorities emphasized that the crime was too serious to be considered the act of a juvenile. Aiden was charged with first-degree murder. The prosecution pushed for the maximum penalty, arguing that the teen's actions were planned and brutal. Aiden Fucci's case was a high-profile event that attracted not only local but also national press attention. Prosecutors carefully prepared the prosecution, gathering all the evidence to prove the teenager's guilt. The evidence collected, including camera footage, blood-stained clothing, and a psychological profile of the suspect, became the basis of the prosecution case. After Aiden Fucci was arrested and charged with the murder of Tristan Bailey, preparations for his trial began. The case garnered tremendous local and national attention, becoming a symbol of horrific teen violence. In the months following his arrest, the prosecution and defense assembled their arguments, while investigators continued to work to strengthen the evidence base. Prosecutors promised that they would seek justice and the maximum penalty for Aiden, regardless of his age. It was important to prove that his actions were intentional, not accidental. The trial was expected to be long and difficult, given that the defendant was a minor. However, prosecutors argued that the murder was committed with extreme cruelty and premeditation, and therefore, Aiden should have been sentenced as an adult. The charge prepared by the prosecutors was clear and supported by strong evidence. There was plenty of evidence presented in court that investigators claimed proved that Aiden Fucci killed Tristan with premeditation. Aiden Fucci's defense attempted to portray his actions as the result of incomplete maturity and lack of life experience. The attorneys argued that his behavior should not be perceived as premeditated murder, but rather as a result of his psycho-emotional state and recent experiences with adolescent problems. Low level of maturity. The defense tried to argue that at the age of 14, a teenager cannot yet fully comprehend the gravity of his actions, so he should be tried as a juvenile. They argued that he should not be tried as an adult and asked for a reduced sentence given his age. Accidental homicide version. The defense lawyers tried to argue the version that the attack was accidental and Aiden did not plan the murder. They argued that the teen could have lost control at some point, leading to the tragic outcome. This line of defense attempted to explain away the evidence found as unconscious actions of the teenager rather than a premeditated crime. Innocence of premeditation. The defense insisted that the evidence did not prove premeditated murder, but only pointed to the possibility of an accident. They argued that Aiden could not have fully realized the consequences of his actions and asked the court to consider his age and emotional immaturity. However, the court and the prosecution argued that such actions could not be justified by the teenager's age or emotional instability. The trial became long and arduous. Each side put forward their own evidence and tried to prove their case. The trial was emotionally demanding not only for the prosecution and defense, but also for Tristan's family. Tristan's parents were often present at the sessions and expressed their position, emphasizing that they could not forgive their daughter's killer. Witness interviews. During the trial, witnesses who had previously interacted with Aiden were called into court. They recounted that the teenager often showed aggression, was prone to violence, and even discussed wanting to kill. The testimony of these people became an important argument for the prosecution. Interrogation of Fucci. Aiden Fucci was subpoenaed to testify. He continued to deny his guilt, claiming that Tristan's death was accidental. However, his testimony was inconsistent, and under questioning, his nervousness and demeanor only increased suspicion.
Fucci is charged as an adult for first-degree murder, all new at 11.
Psychological testimony. The psychologists who conducted the evaluation testified that Aiden showed clear signs of lacking emotional maturity, but was mature enough to realize the consequences of his actions. This testimony was key to the prosecution's insistence that Aiden's actions were willful. After weeks of arduous proceedings, the court reached its verdict. Aiden Fucci was found guilty of first-degree murder. Prosecutors proved that the teen intentionally killed Tristan, despite his defense, which argued that the killing was accidental. The court verdict caused widespread public outcry. Despite the defendant's young age, the court found his actions to be planned and brutal. Aiden was sentenced to a long prison term, with the possibility of a review of the case after several years, depending on his psycho-emotional state. The public reaction to the sentence was contradictory. Many felt that the teenager should receive the full severity of the punishment because his crime was horrific and unjustifiable. Others argued that his age should have been taken into account in sentencing. Tristan's family expressed gratitude to the investigation and the court for a fair trial. The parents of the dead girl said that despite the verdict, they will never be able to get their daughter back, but they are proud that the perpetrator received the punishment he deserved. For the local community, the trial was an important lesson in the importance of monitoring teenage behavior and intervening in time in case of problematic tendencies. Tristan Bailey's tragedy left a mark on people's hearts, and her story was a reminder that teen violence is a problem that cannot be ignored.